People care more about going to a hockey game, more about watching the newest series on Netflix than spending 100 hours to make their lives substantially easier going forward. You spend 100 hours today, it'll save you 10,000 hours of working, honestly, and probably more.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Nick to the podcast. Nick is a freedom first Bitcoiner, Austrian economics, traveler, father, and husband. Welcome to the Bitcoin Age, Nick.
Hi, Paula. Thanks for having me. This is my first podcast, so we'll see how I do on it, but I'm excited for it, and yeah, looking forward to some great conversation.
And I see you have Larry Lepard's book in the back there. We'll have to discuss that too.
That is a really good book. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, me too. Before we get to some of that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up on a farm in southern Alberta to some very conservative parents, and have three brothers. So I worked on the farm and whatnot through my early life, and then I decided that wasn't for me, so I moved up to Edmonton, where I currently live today. Went to school for power engineering, and then I got into the oil and gas sector, which is very common in Alberta. And from there, which I actually currently still do work in the oil and gas sector, hopefully for not too much longer, but we'll see. Well, growing up, I was homeschooled, and that I think was part of the path to keep me out of the system a little bit, which I'm grateful to my parents for, which kind of, I think, helped my worldview shape a little bit. So that helped, as well as going to school, and my parents raised me very independently.
Why did your parents choose to homeschool you?
My parents didn't like the way the school system was going, even back in the 90s. And so that was the main reason from my perspective.
And what are some of the things you did as a homeschooler that were different? Did you learn about the world? Did you learn about money?
Not so much that, but my mom taught us basic skills, not like all the fluff that they teach in public school, I guess. So that was, yeah, that was that. So
And what brought you to Bitcoin?
brought me to Bitcoin and a whole bunch of things stemming from my childhood to my independence focused. I realized that at early age, early-ish, that the government didn't have your best interests at heart. Starting in 2013 to 2015, I started getting into the stock market and investing in different companies and whatnot. And after about 5 years, I realized that it was hard to be an investor and also work a job. It was like a full-time job to invest, and that was very difficult for me to. Yeah, I didn't like that. So I tried to find the best investing strategy. Therefore, kind of got me on the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and from there, over from 2020 to 2023. By 2023, I was pretty much all in on Bitcoin, and after many thousands of hours of research.
That's really cool. I had a similar experience. The people that I was paying to invest for me, they were up like 1% for the year. And I know that, the S&P goes up 15%. I'm like, how can you be up 1%? And so I started doing it on my own, but it isn't that easy. I have to agree, it's not that easy. And I speak to many Bitcoiners, and many Bitcoiners eventually get out of the stock market, which we know is on the fiat system, and go all in on Bitcoin. So, did you do that? Did you mostly go
I'm
all
Yeah, I'm mostly all in on Bitcoin. I do have some MicroStrategy or now strategy shares um, as an investment, but Bitcoin primarily is my savings vehicle and my long-term, wealth accumulate. If I have money, I put it in Bitcoin. The strategy is in a registered account. That's kind of why that's part of the reason why I got into strategy. But I do like what Michael's doing with it. He is breaking the system. That's one Bitcoin buy at a time. So it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I love it. And many people are in retirement accounts or money that cannot be moved right now. And MicroStrategy and the ETFs for that purpose, I can understand why people use that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about Austrian economics. What have you learned about that so far?
Oh, that's a very deep subject, and I've been interested in that for quite a number of years, I think, because for me, Austrian economics just makes sense. The market dictates. It's a free market with no government intervention. That's kind of the thesis of it, and I think that's very important. The government should not be in our business. The government should be very minimally involved in society, I think, and I think the more it gets involved, and the more it has got involved in the last 100 years, since getting off the gold standard in 1913, arguably for the First World War, I think that was kind of the tipping point in when the world started degressing. Um, you look at all the inventions in the world from in the late 1800s, early 1900s. There's countless inventions. Um, since 1913, what have we really invented? I mean, lots digitally, but outside of the digital era, not a lot, at least in comparison. So I think it's because the free market hasn't been able to progress because of all the government, yeah, just all the government
Intervention.
intervention and also manipulation in the markets, picking winners and losers. That's they do that all the time, and that's just terrible. So yeah, that's kind of a bit on Austrian economics. I'm interested in it. I don't know enough about it. I always try and read as much as I can. The older the Mises and those ones I find are a bit dry for me, but the new Austrian economic maxis, so to speak, the Larry Lepards, the Seyfedin and Amus, I find them interesting and a bit more with the times. So they're easier to read for me, I guess, too. So, and I do like audiobooks. I'm not, as far as reading, I don't, with my three and a half year old daughter, I find audiobooks that are just easier to find the times.
But you did read Larry's there. You have the real book there, right?
I did read Larry's and I'll listen to his audiobook. It's actually supposed to be coming out in 10 days, I think I heard on X, roughly.
Yeah. And Larry's book really goes through the history and then also Austrian economics. And I agree that I prefer the more modern approach to it. What's something from Larry's book that really stood out to you?
You know, it's interesting because intuitively, everything I read in Larry's book as well as Safe's book, it just made sense to me. And I think after reading Safe's a few 2, 3 years ago, it's not that I didn't know everything in what Larry was going to say. I don't, of course not, but everything kind of just clicked, right? I shouldn't say that even, but he puts it in such a good way for for even normie to read, like somebody that doesn't know Bitcoin. I think that book would be a pretty good starting point for those people. Um, as far as for me, what I got out of it, I basically just putting the puzzle together in a very digestible way. Yeah, anything in particular is a bit hard for me to pinpoint, I
Yeah.
guess.
There's so much there. I
Yeah.
agree. I love that he laid out the problem and went into the solution equally. And yeah, it was great. So you call yourself a freedom first Bitcoiner. Why do you call yourself that? And why is freedom so important?
Um, Stemming from probably before this, but the trucker convoy in Canada and the Canadian government banning or freezing bank accounts and whatnot. things like that, as well as just past experiences in my life. The government is way too involved in our lives. The government should be there to enforce laws like, the obvious ones, murder, whatnot, and keep out of our business as far as things that don't affect other people in any real meaningful sense. And they also need to stay out of, like, deregulate, let the free market work. No matter what government we have, whether it's liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, they're way too involved, and they try and control people's lives too much. And I'm not a proponent of that. I think that people should have the choice to do what they want when they want, and as long as it's not adversely impacting somebody else, physically. Physically is the main one. It should be all relatively fair game.
I agree. I agree with the free market too. And we've heard that we have never had a free market since beginning of time. We have never had a true free market. It was a little bit more free when we were backed by gold. But Jeff Booth says all the time, we've never seen a true free market, and Bitcoin is that. And because it's so different to anything we've ever seen, it's very hard for people to grasp.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there. Bitcoin is the only free market that has ever existed. Gold has been manipulated through time. The fiat currencies, the fact that they can print money out of thin air, punch a couple keys on the keyboard now, or back in the day, manipulate the printing presses to dilute your wealth, in essence, is all that does. The more that they print, the more your wealth is diluted. Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million. That there is no advantage for the network to ever change that. A fixed supply of money that can't be manipulated is very important.
Yeah. Decentralized money. Somebody commented on one of my videos that Bitcoin has no use. And it only has the biggest use we've ever seen. Decentralized money. We've never had that. And
Mm-hmm.
decentralized money can give us freedom. I agree with what you say about governments. We hear that things are getting better in the US, but unfortunately, the system is set up for a debt based system to continue to print. And that's what the big print means in
Yeah,
Larry's book, that they are going to have to continue to print. So our very best option is Bitcoin.
yeah. It'll be interesting to see what Doge and the Howard Lutnick and Elon get up to. Do I think it's gonna? Do I think that they're going to be able to do enough to change the long term trend we're going down? No. Do I think that they can delay it a little longer? They've done that over the last 20, 50, 100 years. So I guess there's a good chance that they could delay it a little longer. But as far as stopping the train, no. As Lynette Alden says, there's no stopping this train.
Very true. And even in Canada, you have a mayor who is pro Bitcoin. How are things changing in Canada at all, and adoption?
Adoption is growing, I would say, from the local level. We've started a few initiatives in Edmonton. So we're starting more Bitcoin meetups, and we also started the Bitcoin warehouse. The Bitcoin warehouse is an initiative we started for basically a central hub of Bitcoin in Edmonton. It's right across from the temple, aka Rogers Place. Um, 20,000 people go to those hockey games, throughout the winter, and they're looks like they're going to hit the playoffs, so it'll extend into May and June potentially. Yeah, so the Bitcoin warehouse is kind of like Bitcoin Park in Nashville, where we want it to be a collaborative, innovative space for Bitcoiners, and any company that wants to set up shop and basically accept Lightning payments and whatnot. I'm sure that the owner of the building would be happy to have them. There is lots of opportunity, and it is keeping a bunch of us quite busy with this initiative. So it's great to see.
That is wonderful. Is your meetup also held there?
Yes, our meetups are going to be held there in the future.
And do you have a good turnout with your meetups? Tell us a little bit about your meetups because we all know most of us don't have a lot of Bitcoin friends, regular friends. And that's why these meetups are so helpful to us because we can get out and interact with other people who see what we see.
How we're structuring our meetups is we're planning to do Bitcoin 101s meetups, which will kind of encompass beginners and everybody from beginners to experts in the space on a monthly or even twice a month basis, depending on the level of interest we get. And then beyond that, we're planning to do like social events. So Satoshi Socials is what we're calling them, and that could be anything from a games night to a movie night to maybe a documentary. And then on top of all that, education events will be hosted by one of the organizers going forward as well. So that could be like something like a hardware wallet or a hot wallet. It could be like just really any educational. There's so many things in Bitcoin that it can touch. So even mining, we have one community member that wants to put a Bitcoin liquid miner in our warehouse. That would be really cool to see because they're quiet. They can kind of replace your furnace. He's testing it out in his house as we speak, and that would be something. If it's in our warehouse, people can see it, people can touch it. It can be potentially connected to the ocean mining network, and then you can earn money from your furnace, in essence. So that would be a very cool thing to see. Yeah, all sorts of ideas. This is a very new project, so forgive the website, which I'll say it's bitcoinwarehouse.ca. So it's a bit rough still, but we'll make it better over time.
Yeah, that's very cool. Do you have people in your life and in your family that are into Bitcoin like you?
Fortunately, that is a struggle of mine. I would love to get my family members involved. I have definitely told on quite a number of them about Bitcoin, and I I do chill it once in a while here and there in different ways, but it's a hard subject for people to get, and I'm not the greatest at probably presenting it to people, but I think it's frustrating for Bitcoiners because we went down the rabbit hole so far, and then trying to connect back with the average person is pretty difficult sometimes. So, and as they say, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. Sometimes you just don't get it until you get it, and once you get it, you get it. So
What was the trigger for you to get Bitcoin? I think, something has to happen in their lives. Either they realize they're on a rabbit, they're not on a rabbit hole, they're on a hamster wheel, or they realize something's wrong with the money, the truckers that you mentioned in Canada. So something happened with us. I always wonder why it hasn't happened with other people. But what was it for you?
this is something I've often thought about, and honestly, there is not one thing. There was not one action that just sparked me to get Bitcoin. Again, I grew up in a very independent, focused way. My parents, I grew taught me to be very independent, so I think that helps. I had trouble in the stock market as far as it was a full-time job to make good returns in the stock market, and even then, it was a question mark. Basically, legalized gambling, as I like to say. There's that, the trucker convoy, and just my lack of trust in the government in general. I think even prior to the trucker convoy helped me push me down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I often say that Bitcoin risk adjusted, but today is probably the best time you can buy Bitcoin. ETFs have been launched over a year ago now. The federal government in the US is pro Bitcoin. Many states are adopting Bitcoin, and yet you talk to the average person, which I get, they don't know this stuff. We're much in our own world here. But you explain this stuff to them, and they don't seem to care. It's really fascinating to me, how people don't. Yeah, people care more about going to a hockey game, more about watching the newest series on Netflix than spending 100 hours to make their lives substantially easier going forward. You spend 100 hours today, it'll save you 10,000 hours of working, honestly, and probably more, but that's at a minimum, because the 100 hours will inevitably turn into 500 hours. And once you've learned about Bitcoin that much and you understand it, you will save yourself a lot of time in the fiat system working 9 to 5. Because the price of Bitcoin, though it is volatile, it will always go up. People have to zoom out and just look at it from a 4 year, 10 year graph. Zoom out. The further you zoom out, the better it is for Bitcoin. And if you zoom in, sure, your S&P might go up 5% in a year, or 10%, 15%, 20% in a year, but in the long run, it is going down against Bitcoin, and that's a fact.
Everything falls when priced in Bitcoin. You mentioned the short-term thinking, and I'm sure you know I've interviewed Seb Bunny, and he puts this really well, that the fiat system encourages short-term thinking and almost like a meaningless in our life, and people don't even realize it. So we have to live for today. Yeah, when's the next hockey game, the next football game? And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, how are your finances in the meantime? And sometimes I think people don't look at it because they're doing okay. You know, their lives are going pretty well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't want to look at the long term. But I almost feel like Bitcoin, like you said, people get it at the price they deserve. I always feel that's a bit harsh. One of my guests said people get Bitcoin when they're ready. And you get ready by either having something happen in your life or a shock to the system where something just doesn't feel right. Mostly. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of different. That's why I like talking to people, to hear all the different stories and what brings people to Bitcoin and what attracts them. Nobody really leaves, right? Once we come
Yeah,
and find
it's
Bitcoin and
crazy.
do a little bit of research, most people don't go backwards.
Yeah. You said something when you're talking about Seb Bunny.
Low time preference.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's interesting. It was probably a couple of years ago when I came to this realization. I was fairly heavily invested in Bitcoin, but I wasn't full in yet. Say I was half in, right? I got thinking about it, about this fiat mindset and Bitcoin mindset. If I invest everything in Bitcoin right now, is there a 5% chance I'm wrong? Maybe. I would say that would be high at the time, but this was probably pre-ETF, so let's say 5%. If I invest everything in Bitcoin and I lose it all with the fiat system, if I put all my money in the fiat system at this point, that money is only going to be worth, I mean, by the time I'm 70, 80, 50 years from now, it's going to be worth literally 10% if we're lucky. I mean, probably a lot less than that with the way the money printers are spooling up these days. So it's quite interesting. You say low time preference, Bitcoin high time preference. Yeah, why wouldn't you spend your money if you're in the fiat system? To me, you may as well live for today. And that got me, that kind of moved the needle further for me into Bitcoin, because I've never been a high time preference person. I've always been a saver. I've always been an investor. And that was beaten into me by my parents at a pretty young age. They were very conservative, like I said. Saving was pretty important to them. But yeah, and I figured I'd, yeah, put that in.
I like that. I like to take it a little further because I think a lot of people are here. So I think some people are half in, but I'll keep half in the stock market just in case. So there is that. But you're absolutely right. In 20 years, that's probably going to be worth 10%. But in order to get to that high conviction of Bitcoin, it is quite a big leap to say I'm going all in because this is the world I want to see and I'm going to live on this Bitcoin standard.
I think the average person has trouble with volatility. And this is another thing that I've gotten over in my life. I rode the last cycle's peak. I started investing like fairly shortly before the peak, maybe at 45,000 on the way up in 2020, 2021. And it hit 67,000, 69,000. And then it started going down and down and down and down. And I'm happy to say I sold like 1% of what I bought. I mean, I was like, when I hit 15,000, like, okay, is it gonna still keep going? And I'm like, uh, oh, then I curved, and then I didn't start buying until it hit about 25,000 again, just to, make sure. But the volatility to me is a big hurdle for people to get over. And as Bitcoin matures, it will naturally be less volatile, in my opinion. That said, it's still very volatile. It went from 109 to 77 recently. So for most people, that is stomach churning. For me, it doesn't even faze me anymore. I think it could drop to 50,000, and it probably would just be another day in the world for me, which I'm grateful for because it gives me more conviction to just hold to my guns on it, I guess.
Well, because you're at the point now where you understand Bitcoin. And like you said, when you zoom out long term, everything falls when priced in Bitcoin. And something I'm working on, and I'm going to be interviewing Jeff Booth again next month. Yeah, he's always takes a lot of thinking to interview Jeff Booth because he says that when we price it in the US dollar or the Canadian dollar, we're actually making that system stronger. So one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin.
That's true, yeah. And this is one thing where I haven't quite got to that level. That's probably the next hurdle for me mentally is getting to the one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, or one of the next hurdles maybe. And eventually I'll get there, but yeah, that is a bit of a leap still, so for me.
Yeah, and I've figured out why because at the beginning you said there might come a point where you quit your job. And in order to do that, you need to probably have Bitcoin at a certain level because I'm the same. when if Bitcoin goes where we're expecting in fiat terms, I am already working towards doing what I love because time is our most valuable asset. So that's why I talk about Bitcoin because I enjoy that and I'm not enjoying the fiat job as much anymore. So does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I have struggled for the last number of months because I know this year is with 90% certainty, this year is going to be a big year for Bitcoin. And I struggle going to work already. It is hard, and I find it's not really the best for my coworkers and whatnot either. I think of that like because I'm not really there. I'm not fully committed to to that job, and it's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I have responsibilities, and I have to, in my mind, the way I justify um, it is I just have to wait till my commitments can be made through fully through Bitcoin before with a bit of a cushion because as we know it is volatile. So in 2026, I mean it could drop substantially. And I would say if it goes up substantially, it'll drop substantially. If it goes up, gradually this year, then I don't see huge drop like we have seen, like the 80% drops in the past. So I think that's my thesis on it, anyhow, or my theory on it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's very interesting to look at these. You know, I interviewed Max DeMarco, and he lives on the Bitcoin standard. And the way he described it is that when Bitcoin goes down 30%, well, he cuts back in his expenses. But the freedom that he and others get from living all on Bitcoin is something that I aspire to. I don't think it's easy because of the volatility, like you mentioned. In time, that might go down. But him and then also Mark from the Netherlands, who also lives on the Bitcoin standard, I'm going to be releasing that right before your video. And he's another one who lives full on the Bitcoin standard, left the Netherlands and travels the world with his family.
yeah.
So tell me about your travel, your love of travel.
Oh, yeah, that's my passion outside of Bitcoin. I do really love traveling. Recently, we were in Texas. First time we had been there. Traveled around there for 3 weeks. It's a bit challenging now with a 3.5-year-old daughter, but we make it work. The year before, we went to Orlando or Florida for 3 weeks. So we went to Miami, where you're at, and down to the Keys, and that was yeah, it was quite neat. We went to the parks for in Orlando for our daughter, and yeah, that was cool. We've been to Europe quite a number of times. We've been to Asia a few times. I haven't ever been to El Salvador, which is on my to-go list, possibly this fall for adopting Bitcoin. We'll see if we can get a group together from Edmonton to go. I would I would really enjoy that, I think. And I haven't been to South America, which is also getting higher and higher on my list, especially because of Bitcoin and the Central America, South America community, I think is growing quite rapidly. So that would be cool to see.
So travel is one area you're willing to spend your money or Bitcoin rather than buy Bitcoin. For me too.
Yeah, I do spend quite, yeah, we spend quite a bit in traveling, but it is our hobby. It's what we like to do, and we don't uh, we don't live extravagant lives here in Edmonton. So that's our thing, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the balance in life, right? Living for
That's right. Yeah.
today, but we have a sound money or sound savings in Bitcoin for the future.
Yeah, it is often I think of it as when we're going on these trips and we're spending a fair bit of money, and then I think, oh man, 5 years from now, that would be a lot more money, but in Bitcoin's realm anyhow. And but like you say, if you're just to stay at home and or just to sit behind your computer desk and plunk on your computer all day, what's it all for? So yeah.
Do you think Bitcoin is an ego or IQ journey? Or both?
Fine.
Like, why don't more people get it? Do you think that's about the ego?
Oh, I think that's very much the fiat system has brainwashed people. No, that's what I think. The whole education system, Keynesian economics, it's so built into our lives, our day-to-day lives. The education system, they don't even teach any finances of any real degree. It's a pet peeve of mine, and this again goes back to the government having their hands in too many pots. They need to get out of education. They need to get out of everything. Let the free market dictate. And if they did that, I think a lot more people would be on their pathway to Bitcoin in a faster period of time.
Yeah, that's the hope. You know, I do think that there are some people who go into government with good intentions, and then the system is just so strong, it corrupts often, and then things go back to normal, or they try to make changes and they make some, but then eventually government thrives on fiat debt-based system. And that is why we are in Bitcoin, because it is outside the system and on another rail.
Yeah, I mean, lots of politicians in your country in the US are starting to get Bitcoin, which is good to see, but how many people truly understand it? Like even like we take a person like Elon Musk, for instance. I mean, if a person like that would just come out and support Bitcoin, the adoption rate would blow up overnight. Does he not understand it? That's hard to say, right? Like I don't know the motivations, and that's the trouble, right? There's so many motivations for people that the average person doesn't see. So many corrupt motivations, whether it's somebody like that or the person down the street that's a CEO of a company in the fiat system or this or that and the next thing. The system is not set up to inform people on what's good for them, whether that's in education, whether that's in healthcare, whether that's in just absolutely anything in savings. So Bitcoin touches every area of our lives, and I think lots of people fail to realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Elon Musk because one of my guests, AA, said that the reason he doesn't get it is because of ego. He's smart enough to get it, but he thought that maybe his ego didn't want him to get it. And I say that he doesn't need it. Michael Saylor needed it. He needed it for his company. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. Yes, it would increase his wealth, but right now it's not dire emergency for him to have it. So yeah, it's interesting just to think about because you're right. It would help for him to come out and support it.
Yeah, that's possibly true. He definitely doesn't need it, but it would make his life better too. I mean, it would make everybody's life better. And
Absolutely.
one thing I've kind of thought of in Bitcoin too is everybody comes to Bitcoin from a different place. Absolutely everybody. So to kind of sell Bitcoin to somebody, you have to first know where their struggles are in life and this and that and the next thing and what they're focused on. And that's a real hard thing to do. Like how do you know when somebody comes to a meetup or this or that or the next thing? And if they're coming to a Bitcoin meetup, I mean they're already, obviously open to the idea. But if they're not even open to hearing about Bitcoin, like so many people in my family, and I'm sure most people in the world aren't open to it yet because they either, like you said before, they either don't need it or that they're doing fairly well in their life. But there is that pain point that they could benefit from hearing how Bitcoin fixes that. Now that's very much hard to know what that is.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I used to think about this a lot, but nobody asked me about Bitcoin in my life. Hardly nobody. Um, but I have thought about this. And from what I've heard is so you meet people where they are, right? How do you know where they are? One of the best orange pill ways that I heard is the first thing is to ask them about what have you heard about Bitcoin that's negative? Let them air out all the negativity. So they might say, oh, it's a scam or it's too volatile. And so once they say these two things, yes, some people have been scammed, but Bitcoin itself has never been hacked. If people lose because they're careless sometimes and volatile, well, we go to the long-term charts and we say, that's one way. And then is inflation affecting you, or how is your saving for retirement going? I'm no great orange pillar either, but I think the very best place to start is starting with what have you heard about Bitcoin that's negative, and at least get that out of the way. Otherwise, they are thinking the whole time, well, in the back of their mind, it's a scam, it's a scam, it's a scam. And if they cannot get over that, you cannot move past.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah. People have these preconceived conceptions of from what they've heard in the government bought media and the fiat system, they've heard all these negative things about Bitcoin that are just simply untrue. I mean, the vast majority of them Like once you do the research, they're not even a concern. Like quantum computing has been brought up lately quite a bit, and I've I did worry about that maybe a year or two ago a little bit. So I just looked into it a little bit, and I mean I don't know. I'm not a techie person per se. I am not concerned about that. Like the nodes will upgrade the system, and I think there's already BIPs in place, Bitcoin improvement protocols in place for quantum computing. And I like this argument on quantum too. Is your password on your bank account is 4 digits, your PIN on it, or your password is 14 digits. If they're going to hack anything, it's not going to be Bitcoin. There's still way more money in the fiat system, so they can hack that all day long with much greater ease than the Bitcoin system currently. So that's absolutely not a concern to me. As far as government capture and all of that, government capturing the fiat system, well, it's captured already. So government capturing Bitcoin, I mean, is it a concern? You could make that argument, but again, it's the best we have. It is absolutely the best system out there. We can worry about the future, or we can just move along and make Bitcoin even better. The more people involved in the network, the stronger it will be, and that's happening. There is exponential growth in Bitcoin, so it's only got one way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the quantum computing. I haven't heard that before. Makes sense they would hack other things before Bitcoin. So tell us how Bitcoin has changed you.
I've heard you ask other people this, and I haven't really thought of this too much, but I guess generally speaking, how it's changed me. I've always been focused on savings and future orientated, I would say. Bitcoin has progressed that even more, I would say. Maybe a good way to say it is it's gave me purpose in life. Because in the fiat system, I was always kind of struggling with what my purpose in life was. And until I found Bitcoin, I don't think I really had the answer to that. And Bitcoin's definitely improved that. How else it's changed me? Definitely once you get public in Bitcoin. So for me, the first 3 years of my Bitcoin journey, I would say I was very much on the computer, learning, reading books, listening to podcasts. I didn't really get out there so much. And then last year, I started going to meetups, and it's really it's really amazing to see what happens when you start getting out there in the community. Every Bitcoiner you meet, you will have something in common with, and probably the majority of things you think, or the majority of things you'll have in common with them, your interest and theirs and whatnot. It's pretty fascinating actually to see that. And I mean, the Edmonton community is fairly small, so getting into the Bitcoin community, you get to meet everybody fairly fast, and it's quite enriching experience, I guess.
Like a new family.
Yeah,
I keep thinking because I have been doing these videos and it takes a long time to edit and I don't have a lot of extra time, but I see all the meetups on the Orange Pill app and I am going to get there eventually, but I can see how wonderful that would be and I can hear it in you and keep going with your meetups and tell us where people can find you.
people can find me on Freedom First Bitcoiner or Freedom First BTCer. First is one ST. They can also find me on Noster. They can find me at Bitcoin Warehouse DA. Those are a few places. So
Great. And I'll put links below. And thank you so much for joining me today, Nick.
yeah, thanks, Paula. It was a great conversation, and yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to expanding the Bitcoin community in Edmonton. And yeah.
Great.